All right, guys, I want to give you my pitch for how I think Denis and company should adapt Dune Messiah, and that is what I think the name of the movie should be, not just Dune Part 3. It's got to be Dune Messiah, I think. So with that being said, there are major spoiler warnings for the first two Dune movies, as well as Dune Messiah, the book. With how things were left off following Dune Part 2, I think that it'll be very difficult to do a one-for-one adaptation across platforms. But so I think there are four main challenges that the screenwriters will face when adapting this movie. The first two Dune movies have done so well with critics and audiences alike that I think they have set themselves up to produce one of the greatest sci-fi trilogies of all time should this third movie land. So the first challenge that I think they need to overcome is the book is a bit of a slow burn, similar to the first movie. And I think for a finale like this, you got to go all in on making it as epic as possible. And I love the first movie personally. I have nothing against the slow burn aspect of this film, but I think when we're talking about concluding one of possibly the greatest trilogies of all time, I don't think a slow burn is going to cut it, and I think they're going to need to interleave more tension and action throughout this movie to really suck in audiences. I think the second big challenge they face here is Lady Jessica is not in the Dune Messiah book at all. She is on Caladan with Gurney Halleck, and I think for someone like Rebecca Ferguson, who has shined so greatly in this role, that you can't just cut her out of this movie. So I'm going to offer a few ideas on how she can fit into this narrative. Again, similar to Lady Jessica, Gurney Halleck is not in the Dune Messiah book, and I think it would be unfair to kind of castrate an actor of Josh Brolin's caliber in this movie by just having him on the sideline and not do anything, because at most I think he could serve as Paul's advisor in this movie, but I think that's more going to be delegated to Stilgar. So again, I think there's something we need to do with Josh Brolin's character as Gurney Halleck, and I will offer my idea on how we can fix that as we get more into this video. The next challenge they're going to face in adapting this is how they're going to do the time jump. I think the time jump is necessary in this movie. They didn't do the time jump in the first two Dune movies, though, because that really only served to have Alia born. But I think it makes sense that they didn't do it because you couldn't really find a 2-year-old who could act, much less speak perfect English, like how Alia does in the books. In the book, there's only a 12-year time jump, but I think we're going to need to do like a 15-year time jump because I think Anya Taylor-Joy can pass for about 15 years old, but probably not 12. The other challenge about doing the time jump is in Dune Part 2 was hinted with Chani's blue scarf that she might be pregnant, but if she is pregnant and we do a 15-year time jump, then Ghanima and Leto are going to be older in this movie than they are in Children of Dune. Don't know if they're going to adapt Children of Dune, but having them to be 15 years old would be kind of weird for this. So I think we kind of need to scrap the idea that Chani was pregnant with Paul's kids. And speaking of Chani, I think this is honestly the top challenge in adapting this book, as a lot of the plot of Dune Messiah revolves around Chani wanting to have Paul's kids and Irulan wanting to have Paul's kids, and the conflict that they have, and Irulan is giving contraceptives to Chani's food to keep her from having kids, and I just don't think that can happen in this movie based on Chani leaving Paul essentially at the end. But I do think there is a really special role for Chani in this movie, which I'll get into. And now for how I think the plot should go. I think that similar to the other movies, we should start with a voiceover, and I think it should be done by Anya Taylor-Joy's Alia. And I think we should get a shot of a terraformed Arrakis. Maybe we see some ponds, some water, some shrubbery, and it could feel almost vision-like because this is going to be in the future. And I think we should get a vague voiceover kind of describing the consequences of Paul's religious jihad. And I think this voiceover monologue can kind of function as it does for the beginning of a chapter in each of the books, and I think that would be good. Okay, so after this vision-like sequence of a transformed Arrakis, I think we jump right back to where we left off with Dune Part 2. The Fremen are loading up. They're about to go wage war on the whole universe. Chani is on a worm, riding away, probably holding back tears. And then maybe Paul has a word with Jessica, talking about how he saw this as the only way, something like that, to give continuity with this. And then I think we should get into the Holy War. Like I said, this book is a bit of a slow burn. It's very character and politically driven, which is why we love Dune in the first place, honestly. But I think a very important aspect of these movies is the visual scale. And I think to bring some more excitement to it, I think our first main sequence could be showing scenes from the Holy War as it goes across the galaxy, across the universe. I knew a lot of people who left Dune Part 2 being like, dude, Paul is the Messiah. Like, he's the good guy, he's the hero. And I think Frank Herbert would be is probably rolling in his grave hearing that. Like, they're missing the point. Maybe the movie wasn't clear enough. But so what we need from the Holy War scenes, I think, is just show me some brutal shit. Show me planets being torn apart. Show me innocent people dying, people cowering at the Fremen as they unleash this jihad. And during this, I think this is where Gurney Halleck's role can come in, and I think he should die during these battles and during the Holy War. Again, I don't think there is anything for Gurney to do as a character in this movie. I think it's unfair to him. I think it's unfair to Josh Brolin as the actor. And I think having someone so close to Paul die really brings into perspective the consequences of this Holy War. It's not just a bunch of random Fremen who we aren't attached to dying. This is someone who is beloved in the movies, beloved in the books, and a character that we have a real attachment to. Now I think we can jump about 15 years into the future to about the year 11,006. I think Alia should be born. Paul's an emperor. He looks a little older. He looks a little more rugged. And from this point on, I think we can progress pretty similarly to the book in terms of the plot. We'll start out with Edric and Scytale. I think Scytale could be played by someone like Rami Malek, who can kind of pull off this devious and slimy thing that the base dancers have going on, and they're talking to Princess Rulon about gifting Paul, Duncan Idaho's Gola hate to kick off the conspiracy to take down Paul. So personally, I didn't like Scytale as much as the Baron or Fade as the villain in the books. So I think we need to do some stuff just to make him feel like a real threat to Paul, make him cunning, make him devious, make him feel like he can actually outwit Paul and take him down. And again, I think Rami Malek would be a really good actor to fit this role. While that conspiracy against Paul is forming, I think what Jessica could be doing instead of being on Caladan is she could stay on Arrakis in Arrakeen. And one of the main plots is about Arulin trying to secure the Atreides bloodline per the request of the Reverend Mother. And I think that could be what Jessica does, is she's the one who's combating and playing this kind of game of wits and game of riddles against Princess Rulon and the Reverend Mother. Now, for the important role that I think Chani can play, I think she should be living in the desert with other Fremen who miss their old way of life and wish things didn't have to change under the new Emperor of Paul. He's simply just their new oppressor. So I think she should be leading the Fremen revolution, the Fremen conspiracy to take down Paul. And obviously, I think she would still care about him, so she doesn't want him murdered or anything like that. But they simply just want to move on from him as emperor and have their planet back. As for Anya Taylor-Joy's Alia, I really see this as kind of like a role similar to hers in The Northman. I think the scenes of her preaching in the temple, when I was reading that and picturing her as the actress, I really pictured the boat scene in The Northman where Amleth has just left her and she gives her little monologue. But anyway, I think she would absolutely knock this stuff out of the park. And then I think the other thing that is important for her character is that her and Hate start to develop that romantic relationship. And then as for our main guy, Paul, I really just need to feel like he feels that he's losing control of his empire. Once he hears that they took a sandworm to another planet and they're trying to reproduce a spice cycle, I need to feel the pressure that he is under. I need him to feel like he's losing control of the empire. And to keep his plot engaging and the suspense and tension high, I think that's really going to come down to the directing, the cinematography, the editing, which thankfully they have the best in the world doing this. So I think the plotting of the conspiracies against Paul, and I think that raising the stakes, raising the tension, that can mostly be about like the early to middle third of the movie. But something else I'd really like to see in this movie is just the conversations between Paul and Hate. I think Paul could talk to him about his visions, talk to him about visions that he has of the future that might scare him. He could talk to him about his fallen moon vision, which is a big thing in the book, as that would relate to Chani. And I think it would be a cool reflection of the scene that they shared in the first movie where Duncan tells him everything important happens when we're awake. And then as we start to move into the final act of the movie, I think we need to incorporate Bijaz, the dwarf who one of the Fremen gives to Paul to help him uncover the conspirators against him. Obviously, Bijaz will be played by Peter Dinklage because he is the best dwarf actor out there. When Paul is out in the desert retrieving Bijaz, I think this is when we need to have the stone burner go off, which would be kind of the climax of the movie. We kill several Fremen, blinding others, blinding Paul, of course. And I think that this should also kill Chani, as this would, I think, fulfill Paul's vision of her being affected by the atomics in Dune Part 2. And I think the anger that he would have from Chani dying due to this conspiracy to kill him, you could have this anger that really carries over into the trial scene of Korba and the other Fremen. I really like that chapter in the book, and I think while that trial scene is going on, we could have Bijaz trying to manipulate hate into killing Paul, and if we get this kind of back and forth of the scenes, I would feel that there is a significant stake in Paul's life being ended. I'd also like to add, when Paul is blinded, we could maybe get a shot of him without his eyeballs, just the empty eye sockets. But I think for the most part, most people aren't just going to want to see that. So I think it'd be cool if he wore the blindfold like in this image. Once the trial has concluded, I think we can get the scene where Paul is talking with Hate and they uncover Duncan Idaho's memories within him, and Hate becomes fully Duncan again. And then Paul has him kill Bijaz because he realized that Bijaz was conspiring against him. And then after Bijaz has been killed, I think Scytale should sneak into Arrakeen using the disguise of one of the Fremen women that he killed. And he'll confront Paul about turning Chani into a Gola as long as he pretty much steps down as Emperor, signs over all of his spice holdings. But obviously Paul will refuse and they'll have a duel. And I think you could get some really interesting shots with this using Paul's prescient abilities to work his way through the fight without being able to physically see. And obviously this duel will end with him killing Scytale. And then I think the movie should end with Paul walking into the desert per Fremen tradition, that the blind will essentially offer themselves up as gifts to Shai Hulud, and he'll leave Alia as regent. And yeah, I think that's how the movie should end. I left out, I think, a lot of the finer details of the plot. Like, I didn't really mention Stilgar too much, but I think he has an important role in this, as does Rulon. But I think those are the main points that this movie should try and hit on. I think the Dune series is a little Game of Thrones-esque, where it doesn't play into any of these common heroic tropes. And I think having an ending like this, where Paul simply just steps down as Emperor and walks into the desert, would be a very fitting end to the series. And I hope that the visual scale, the spectacle, and just the overall epicness of the series can come together for this final movie. Thanks for watching, and let me know your thoughts.